Over the last couple of weeks, I've been talking to some of my preparedness friends that I've met while I've been online that live out on the East Coast. There are quite a few preppers actually that live in the North Carolina area, that area around there. And I've been getting some ideas about exactly how things have been unfolding out there. And in the process of talking to one friend, he sent me this post from somebody, and I'm not sure who this person is, but it's his experience going through this situation. And the reason I wanted to do this video today is because it's really important that we get these real world examples of how something might unfold. We can listen to all the people on YouTube, all the people online talking about you need to have this or that. But the best information is really going to come from those people that have experienced it. I've talked about on my podcast, Selko and the Balkan Wars and what he experienced. And this is that same type of situation. So I want to go over some of the items that this person was talking about and the tips that we can get from that and things we can do to better prepare ourselves. As preppers, we talk about these large scale disasters, the world shattering disasters, right? Everything just completely goes to crap. But a lot of times it's going to be situations like this, maybe not a hurricane, but a week or so without power, without resources. And we're going to have to figure things out, survive until help can get there. And honestly, that is the most probable type scenario that we could be looking at. It doesn't mean we need to forget about these larger ones and that they're not even possible, but these are the ones that these are the basis of preparedness and the things that we really need to take care of now. So whether you're talking about a hurricane, an earthquake, something that takes out the power grid for a week or so, these types of things are going to be really important. So the first thing he talks about is Starlink internet. He says all our phones have say SOS, can't text for help, don't know what's going on. I plugged in my satellite internet and have been helping the whole neighborhood call loved ones. Everyone is offering me anything for their supplies because it's so valuable. And it's important to note with this, Starlink internet is fantastic and one of the only options in a situation like this for internet, but it does require a base station, meaning that base station needs to have power for the satellites and everything to work. So if that base station is outside of that disaster zone, that's great. But if it's inside that disaster zone, it's not going to work very well. Musk has done a pretty good job of making sure everything is set up to help with that. So that is a very good point. And the other point he made in here is basically people are offering anything for supplies. And that would be true as well. So if you are in a zone that isn't affected, completely devastated by something, you could help out quite a bit. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the frustration down there with FEMA and these government agencies is because those people down there that want to help their neighbors and want to get in there and do stuff. And all of the red tape that sort of gets in the way sort of hinders them from just going and helping their neighbors. So you're going to see quite a bit of that type of mentality. It's not always hunker down and, preppers are going to hide and all of that. It's helping the community. And if there is an option, if it is a situation like that, preppers are going to be the most helpful, I think, in this type of situation, and not the stereotypical what everybody thinks. We're out, with our guns and ammo and hiding and protecting our stuff. We're going to be out there helping if that is possible. And that mentality is severely lacking in society these days. And thankfully, the people down there still have that mentality. Now, the next one here, he talks about solar panels, solar power, and these battery banks. I recently did a video on a 2,500 watt power bank, which I talked about was sort of the bare minimum for a disaster situation like this. And this sort of illustrates that point. It talks about I can run my satellite internet, electric kettle to purify water, charge headlamps, electronics, instant pot for cooking, ice maker for cooling, everything I need. I won't run out of sun like I would propane or gas if this extends for a lot longer. And this is a very good point because, yes, solar is great and it is that renewable energy source if that's an option for you. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't have the gas and the other types of fuels as well. It all works together. if that fuel runs out, then you at least have that solar. Or if you don't have enough sunlight to recharge those power banks, you could use a generator like the power bank I just did a review on. It charges in 2 hours. So you could turn that generator on in a safe period of time for 2 hours, charge that battery bank, and use that battery overnight or whatever you need to do. That way that generator would only be running for a couple hours. But it does illustrate the point of having that fuel and those options available to you. Now, if you are completely devastated by this, you're probably not going to have that, and you're probably going to be waiting for those supplies to get to you. But if you are in a safer zone and your supplies have survived, you're going to be set up pretty well to handle, a week or so in a situation like this if you have the proper fuel stored, if you have the solar panels and that power bank. And on the topic of fuel, he mentions gas cans and extra gas. These were sold out everywhere. I think he's talking about gas cans, and are harder to get them than the gas itself. When power goes out, so do the gas station pumps. When you have portable gas, you can run a generator, evacuate, drive to where your supplies are, check on your family members or the neighborhood. He says here, people are stranded and sleeping at gas stations for days in their cars waiting for power to come back on just so they can get home. And this is one I talk about all the time, having gas cans and some extra gas stored, at least 5 gas cans that you rotate through. You label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you rotate them through before you go fill up your car or truck, you fill that up with that gas can. Then you take that gas can with you and refill it and rotate them down the line. Also, you need fuel stabilizer as well. But this is a situation where it could be one of those things where if you do need to get out of there or you do need to run generators, you have that fuel available to do so. So it is really important, because when the power grid goes down, all the critical infrastructure goes down with it, whether you're talking about water processing plants, you're talking about fuel processing plants, not just the gas stations. All of that goes down, and you need to have backups ready and available for that situation. So it's one of those things that gets overlooked by some people, but it really is important to have some fuel stored, some gasoline stored, just in case, whether you're talking about bugging out or you're talking about running a generator or a quieter generator inverter. Now, the next one he talked about is a critical point that a lot of people don't give a second thought to, and that's knowledge. Knowledge on how to survive without a huge stash. If you are one of those people that were stuck in that and lost everything, what do you do at that point? He says here, some preppers spend too much on stocking up and not enough on education. None of us knew that the hurricane was going to be this bad. Some people lost their entire house, including all of their supplies. Those who know multiple ways to collect water, purify it, start a fire, find food, are the ones still alive that haven't been rescued yet. It says here, I could go for another month if I had to with nothing but my backpack and tools. And this is what we do as in preparedness, right? We prepare for all of these different events. We make sure we understand different ways to start a fire, different ways to purify water. All of this knowledge that we have, that if everything that we've stockpiled and everything that we have is gone, we have the ability, even if it's just for a few days, to maybe go find food. This is sort of dependent on your geographic location, whether hunting is available, but there's foraging for wild edibles. I mean, it's all sorts of different things. We need to figure out what our options are if we are in a situation where we've lost everything, help is a few days away, and we need to make sure and we're surviving at that point. The water's dirty, the food is out, all of those things. Those are the things that we need to think about. And honestly, as people that are interested in preparedness and preppers, we've sort of got a leg up on the average person when it comes to that, because most people have no idea. And when outside resources are unavailable, they're completely lost. And I'll get into a little bit more into food here in a second. But the next one he talks about is guns. And he said, I haven't even thought about needing my gun and realized I put too much into this. Strangers have come together in our area and are taking care of each other like you wouldn't believe. Each person has a surplus of something and is missing something else. So the bartering type of situation has come into play. Now, with this situation, I think it really is dependent on what you're talking about. This type of scenario right here, where it's a natural disaster and help will eventually be there, nobody is really thinking about that. I mean, there are definitely the looters and things you have to take care of and be aware of, but most people are just trying to help everybody out. And I think that's what the biggest thing that I've noticed about this is the local communities there just want to help out. And I think that's the way it would be. Now, this isn't to say that you just need to ignore your self-defense and the firearms and the ammo and all that, because you just never know what might happen and when you might need those. But at the same time, what his point here is that there's a lot of other areas of preparedness that are super important in this situation, and guns aren't one of them. It doesn't mean you don't need them, but in a situation like this, he didn't need them. Moving on to food here, he also said that it's easy for him to find food because of the part of the country he's in. You can fish, forage. You don't cook much because you don't want to waste water on dishes. I had shelf-stable foods prepped, and I'll probably end up only using 25% of it in a month. As people's freezers start to thaw, they had big cookouts, and so it doesn't go to waste. And I've been full most nights. And I think this is important because, yes, this type of situation in a localized disaster like this would probably happen, and people would be doing the cookouts. People wouldn't be asking you about how much food you have. They wouldn't be going hungry. So you wouldn't have to worry about divulging too much information about your food storage. You can join in with the cookouts. Hey, I've got this meat that's going to thaw, but you don't have to give away too much information. But in a situation like this, the food stores that you have, like you said, he's going to go through 25% of what he has. In a situation like this, the food storage that you have is going to last a long time, and you're going to have to be a little bit picky about what you cook, how you cook, and what you eat. But you're not necessarily going to starve to death, or you shouldn't, as long as you've got some prepared. In a week or so, you're going to be just fine, and the neighborhoods are going to be just fine, as long as, I got to emphasize this, as long as it is a situation like this where outside help is eventually going to be there. They just don't know when. If there is no light at the end of the tunnel or any end in sight, that's when things, after even just a couple of days, could get pretty hairy. And we need to think about that as well. But like I said in the beginning, a situation like this is something that we're most likely to experience rather than something that is a complete nationwide grid down event that lasts for months or even years. Now, a couple other things he mentioned here briefly was cash, making sure you have cash, because when the grid is down, you have no other way to get what you need. And again, in a complete societal breakdown, cash could be valueless. But in a situation like this, where those plastic cards you have don't work, cash is going to be more valuable than ever. So making sure you have as much cash as possible, as much as you feel comfortable with, having that cash on hand is going to be really important when the banks are shut down, when the ATMs aren't working, when the electronic cash machines at the stores and all that aren't working. Cash is going to be very valuable, so make sure you have that. He also talked about paper plates and cutlery and things like that, so you don't have to wash dishes. You don't have to waste that water. That's a very good point. We should have a stash. It's up to you how much you want, but it doesn't need to be a whole closet full of paper plates. But if you have some of those, and there is an ending point to this disaster or emergency scenario, that's going to save you from having to wash a lot of dishes. Yes, you're going to have the trash buildup, but if you're talking a week or even 2 weeks, it's not a huge deal. So having some of those is valuable as well. He also talked about how his 4x4 truck was really valuable because he could drive and help others. In this situation, the roads were washed out. It was really, really dangerous. And places, you're not going to get through to some of these places in a Honda. So having a 4-wheel drive would make things a whole lot easier. Heck, even maybe a Subaru or something like that, which is all-wheel drive, would be a whole lot better than just a Honda. And you even think about motorcycles and things like that would be easier to access some of these places. So whether you're talking about a hurricane, an earthquake, any sort of natural disaster, those things are things that we need to think about. Now, again, this isn't a blueprint on how to prepare for these situations. There are a number of factors involved in this, that your location, the type of natural disaster it is, the weather, But we can take information from this and learn from that and sort of adjust our preparedness plans to fit our needs. Whether you live in Washington, Florida, Colorado, anywhere in the United States, think about what those situations that are most likely to affect you and plan accordingly for those. The good thing about preparedness, when you're talking about storing fuel and solar power and battery banks, a lot of these overlap. So we are going to be prepared for, by doing one thing, we're going to be preparing ourselves for a number of different situations. And again, we need to get out of the mindset that everything is the world is on fire and we're going to have to survive like they do in Hollywood in the post-apocalyptic movies. We're going to have to survive like that for a year or longer. Sometimes it's just a few days. Most of the time, it's going to be just a few days. And again, doesn't mean we need to forget about these larger scale disasters, but most of our energy, I think, needs to be focused on these smaller disasters. At any rate, if you have any advice for anyone, you want to leave a comment down below, make sure and do that. With that, I am done here today, everyone. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to get notified. But until next time, take care and prepare. We will talk to you all later.